Hyunwoo Kim walked into the Great Hall of the Galactic Council for the last time. His simple black suit looked plain next to the colorful robes and shining armor of the alien representatives. The hall was huge, with walls that reached up so high they seemed to touch the stars themselves. Hundreds of different species sat in their special seats, each one designed for their unique bodies. The Vorthak representatives looked like living crystals, their bodies catching and throwing light in all directions. They spoke in musical tones that sounded like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. The Namari floated in their gas-filled containers, their cloud-like forms shifting and changing colors as they moved. The Krelliks made clicking sounds with their mandibles, their insect-like bodies covered in hard, shiny shells. Hyunwoo had been the human ambassador for 15 years. He had sat through thousands of meetings, listened to countless debates, and helped solve problems that seemed impossible. But today was different. Today, he carried a simple message that would change everything. So-Jin Park sat beside him, her fingers moving quickly over her data pad. She was the chief human trade representative, and she knew every detail about human business across the galaxy. Her quiet efficiency had helped build trade networks that connected hundreds of worlds. Tae-ho Lee, the human military liaison, sat on Hyunwoo's other side. His job had been easy because humans rarely fought anyone. Instead, they helped others solve their fights. The council leader, a tall Vorthak whose crystal body glowed with blue light, called the meeting to order. His voice rang through the hall like a bell. The council recognizes Ambassador Hyunwoo Kim of the Human Federation. Hyunwoo stood up slowly. The hall became quiet. Even the Namari stopped their constant color changing. He looked around at all the faces, some familiar after years of working together, others strange and alien but no longer frightening. Honored representatives, Hyunwoo began, his voice calm and clear. I come before you today to deliver a simple message from the Human Federation. After much thought, we have decided to withdraw from the Galactic Council and all related agreements. A murmur ran through the hall. Some of the smaller species looked surprised, but most of the major powers seemed unbothered. The Vorthak Council leader's glow dimmed slightly, which meant he was thinking. We do not leave in anger. Hyunwoo continued. We do not leave because of any wrong done to us. We simply believe it is time for humanity to find its own path among the stars. We thank you for the years of cooperation and wish you all success in your future endeavors. One of the Krelliks representatives made a sharp clicking sound. What about your trade agreements? Your research partnerships? Your military support pacts? So-Jin Park stood up next to Hyunwoo. All human trade agreements will be honored until their natural expiration dates. We will not break any contracts, but we will not renew them. All research data currently shared will remain available. All military support will continue for 6 more months to allow you time to make other arrangements. But why? Asked a Namari, its gaseous form turning a confused purple color. Humans have been part of the council for 200 years. You have seats on every major committee. Your species has voting rights equal to any other. Hyunwoo smiled sadly. That is true, and we are grateful for those rights. But sometimes a species must choose its own destiny. We have decided that our destiny lies elsewhere. The Vorthak Council leader's crystal body began to glow brighter. Is this about the mining rights dispute on Kepler 442b? We can discuss that again. Perhaps we were too hasty in our decision. No, Hyunwoo said gently. This is not about any single issue. This is about humanity's future. We have made our choice. Tae-ho Lee stood up and added, all human military personnel will be withdrawn from joint operations within 6 months. All human colonies in council space will be evacuated. All human-operated facilities will be handed over to local authorities or shut down safely. The hall erupted in confused chatter. The alien representatives talked among themselves in dozens of different languages. Some seemed worried, but most appeared relieved. The humans had never been the strongest military force. They had never controlled the richest worlds. They had never invented the most amazing technologies. To most of the council, humans were just another small species that had somehow earned a seat at the big table. If that is your final decision, the council leader said, his tone formal but not unfriendly, then the council accepts your withdrawal. We will miss your contributions, of course. Hyunwoo bowed politely. Thank you for your understanding. We will begin the withdrawal process immediately. All transitions will be smooth and complete. As the 3 humans gathered their things and walked toward the exit, conversations around the hall continued. Most aliens had already moved on to other topics. The Vorthak were discussing new crystal formations they had discovered. The Namari were arguing about atmospheric composition on their newest colony. The Krelliks were planning their next great migration. Nobody seemed to think the human departure was very important. Over the next few weeks, human ships began leaving Council space. They moved quietly, without fanfare or celebration. Colonies that had been built over decades were carefully shut down. Every building was left clean and empty. Every piece of human technology was removed or properly disposed of. Even the gardens that human colonists had planted were left in perfect condition. On trade stations across the galaxy, human businesses closed their doors. They paid all their debts, completed all their contracts, and said polite goodbyes to their alien partners. Many aliens barely noticed. Human businesses had never been the biggest or most profitable anyway. Human researchers packed up their laboratories and left behind copies of all their work. They shared every discovery they had made, every innovation they had created. Most alien scientists accepted the data without much interest. Human research had always seemed basic and practical, compared to the advanced theories that other species developed. Human military officers handed over their posts to alien replacements. They provided detailed briefings about every operation, every strategy, every potential threat. Most alien commanders thanked them politely, but seemed confident they could handle things on their own. And then, just like that, humans were gone. The last human ship left Council space on a Tuesday. There were no parades, no ceremonies, no angry speeches. The galaxy continued spinning, stars continued burning, and life went on exactly as it had before. Most aliens thought the humans had made a foolish choice. Why would any species give up the benefits of Council membership? Why would they choose isolation over cooperation? Some wondered if humans had found something better somewhere else, but most decided it didn't matter. The galaxy was vast, and there was always plenty of work to do. 3 months after the humans left, Engineer Veltar of the Vorthak noticed something strange. He was working in the main communication center on the Council's capital world, when one of the quantum relay systems started making an odd humming sound. It had never made that sound before. Veltar was considered one of the best engineers in the galaxy. His crystal body could interface directly with electronic systems, allowing him to feel problems rather than just see them. But when he touched the relay system, he found something confusing. The system was working perfectly according to all its original specifications. Every part was in the right place. Every connection was solid, yet something felt wrong. Run a full diagnostic, he told his assistant, a young Vorthak named Silmar. The diagnostic came back green. Everything was fine, but the humming continued, and Veltar noticed that messages were taking slightly longer to travel between star systems. The delay was tiny, just a few milliseconds, but it was growing. On the other side of the galaxy, Dr. Nexini of the Namari was having her own problems. She was trying to manufacture a new batch of medical supplies for the colony worlds, but the automated systems kept producing batches that were slightly off. The medicine still worked, but it wasn't as effective as it should be. Dr. Nexini had been running these same manufacturing processes for 20 years. She knew every step, every chemical reaction, every precise measurement. But now something was different. The computers were following all the same instructions, but the results weren't quite right. Check the calibration on Reactor 7, she told her team. They checked it 3 times. Everything was perfect, but the medicine was still wrong. Meanwhile, on the busy trade station orbiting Proxima Centauri, traffic controller Zixkel of the Krelliks was staring at his screens in confusion. The shipping routes that connected 12 different star systems were becoming inefficient. Ships were taking longer to reach their destinations. Cargo was arriving late. Fuel costs were going up. Zixkel had been managing these trade routes for 8 years. He knew every ship, every captain, every timing requirement. The routes had been running smoothly for decades, but now somehow everything was becoming slower and more expensive. Run the optimization program again. He clicked to his subordinates. They ran it 5 times. The computer kept suggesting the same routes it had always used. But those routes weren't working as well anymore. These problems were happening all over Council space, but nobody connected them to each other. Each species was dealing with their own small technical issues. The problems seemed random and unrelated. The Vorthak thought their communication delays were caused by solar flare activity. They spent weeks studying stellar radiation patterns looking for the cause. They found nothing unusual. The Namari assumed their manufacturing problems were due to contamination in their raw materials. They tested every chemical, every component, every piece of equipment. Everything was pure and clean. The Krelliks believed their shipping delays were caused by increased traffic as the galaxy's economy grew. They built new traffic control centers and hired more controllers. The delays got worse. On the scientific research station near the galactic core, Chief Researcher Mordun of the Vorthak was trying to understand why his experiments kept failing. He was working on a project to create new types of crystal matrices that could store massive amounts of information. The project had been running smoothly for 3 years, but now the crystals kept developing tiny cracks. Mordun examined the crystals under the most powerful microscopes available. The cracks were so small they were almost invisible, but they were enough to ruin the storage capacity. He checked the growth chambers, the nutrient solutions, the temperature controls. Everything was exactly as it should be. Perhaps we need to recalibrate the growth parameters, suggested his assistant. They tried 17 different calibrations. The crystals still cracked. Dr. Yelona of the Namari was having similar problems with her atmospheric processors. These massive machines were designed to convert the toxic atmospheres of new worlds into breathable air for colonization. She had 12 processors running on different worlds, and all of them were starting to produce air that smelled slightly wrong. The air was still safe to breathe. All the chemical tests showed it was perfectly fine. But colonists were complaining about a metallic taste that hadn't been there before. Dr. Yelona ran every test she could think of. She checked filters, analyzed chemical reactions, and examined every component. Everything looked normal, maybe. It's just a temporary fluctuation, her team suggested, but the metallic taste was getting stronger. War Admiral Kexton of the Krelliks was dealing with problems of his own. The defense grid that protected the Council's most important worlds was experiencing random glitches. Warning systems would activate for no reason. Weapon targeting would drift slightly off course. Shield generators would fluctuate in power. None of these problems were dangerous yet. The defense systems still worked. But they weren't working as smoothly as they had for the past 50 years. Kexton ordered his technicians to run complete maintenance on every system. They found nothing wrong. Every circuit was clean. Every program was running correctly. Every component was within normal parameters. But the glitches continued. The strangest thing was that these problems were happening everywhere, but nobody was talking to each other about them. Each department thought their issues were unique. Each species assumed they were dealing with normal technical difficulties. Some of the older engineers started to feel uneasy. Engineer Veltar remembered that the quantum relay systems had been redesigned about 15 years ago. The new design was much more efficient than the old one, but he couldn't remember who had suggested the improvements. Dr. Nexini recalled that her manufacturing processes had been upgraded several times over the years. Each upgrade had made the systems more precise and reliable, but she couldn't find records of who had recommended the changes. Traffic controller Zixkel knew that the shipping routes had been optimized many times since he started working. The current routes were far more efficient than the original ones, but when he looked through the archives, he couldn't find clear documentation of how the improvements had been developed. A few of the aliens started asking questions, but most were too busy trying to fix their immediate problems. The issues weren't serious enough to cause panic. They were just annoying inconveniences that made work a little harder and less efficient. On the Council's capital world, Secretary General Dex Rio of the Vorthak was reviewing reports from across the galaxy. His job was to monitor the overall health of Council civilization. He noticed that there seemed to be more technical problems than usual, but nothing that looked dangerous. Perhaps we need to increase funding for maintenance, he suggested to his advisors. They agreed and approved budget increases for every department. But somehow spending more money didn't make the problems go away. The Council's vast bureaucracy continued to function, but it was working harder to achieve the same results. Messages took longer to send. Supplies cost more to produce. Ships took more time to reach their destinations. Research projects progressed more slowly. Nobody was really worried yet. Advanced civilizations always had technical challenges. The galaxy was vast and complex. Problems were normal and expected. But deep in the archives of the Council's central computer, hidden in files that nobody thought to check, were thousands of small suggestions, improvements, and optimizations. All of them had been submitted by human engineers, scientists, and administrators over the past 200 years. And all of those humans were now gone. 6 months after the humans left, everything started falling apart at once. Engineer Veltar was in the middle of his morning routine when every communication relay in the sector failed simultaneously. Not just the ones with the strange humming sound, but all of them. The quantum network that connected 50 star systems went completely silent. "This is impossible," Veltar said as he stared at his screens. "These systems have multiple backups. They can't all fail at the same time, but they had. For the first time in 200 years, entire regions of Council space could not talk to each other." Veltar and his team worked frantically to restore communications. They tried switching to backup systems, but those failed too. They tried using older, slower methods, but even those weren't working properly. "Get me the original system specifications," Veltar ordered. When the specifications arrived, Veltar discovered something terrifying. The current communication network was completely different from what had been originally built. Someone had redesigned almost every component over the years. The new design was incredibly sophisticated and efficient, but Veltar couldn't understand how it worked. Worse, he couldn't find any documentation explaining the changes. There were upgrade records showing that improvements had been made, but no details about what those improvements actually were or how they functioned. On the medical station orbiting Titan, Dr. Nexini was facing a crisis of her own. The manufacturing systems that produced medicine for half the galaxy had stopped working entirely, not just producing bad medicine, but producing nothing at all. The automated factories were shutting down one by one. When Dr. Nexini's team tried to restart them, the machines would run for a few minutes and then stop again. Error messages appeared on every screen, but they were written in code that nobody could understand. "Who designed these error protocols?" Dr. Nexini asked her assistant. "I don't know," the assistant replied. "The documentation just says they were part of a system upgrade from 12 years ago." Dr. Nexini pulled up the upgrade records. The improvements had made the manufacturing process 3 times more efficient and reduced waste by 90%, but there was no explanation of how the new systems actually worked. The technical documentation was missing. Across the galaxy, traffic controller Zixkel watched in horror as the shipping routes collapsed completely. Ships were getting lost in space. Cargo vessels were running out of fuel in the middle of nowhere. Some ships had been traveling in circles for days without realizing it. The optimization computers that managed trade routes had crashed. When Zixkel tried to restart them, they produced navigation instructions that made no sense. Ships following the computer's directions ended up in empty space, light years away from their destinations. "How is this possible?" Zixkel clicked frantically. "These are the same computers we've been using for decades." But when his team examined the computers more closely, they found that the original software had been completely replaced over the years. The new programs were far more complex and powerful than anything the Krellix had ever created. But nobody could figure out how they worked. Chief Researcher Morden was dealing with the worst disaster of all. The crystal matrices that stored the Council's most important information were dissolving. Not just cracking, but actually melting into useless puddles of mineral soup. Every major database in Council space was failing at the same time. Scientific research from thousands of years was disappearing. Historical records were vanishing. Even basic operational manuals were being lost as the storage crystals collapsed. "This should be impossible," Morden said as he watched centuries of knowledge disappear. "These crystals are designed to last for millions of years." But when he examined the failed crystals, he discovered that they weren't made of the same materials as the original designs. Someone had developed a new crystal growth process that created much more efficient storage matrices. The new crystals could hold 100 times more information in the same space. The problem was that nobody knew how to make new ones. The growth process was incredibly complex, requiring precise timing and chemical balances that weren't documented anywhere. Worse, the new crystals seemed to need constant maintenance that nobody understood. Dr. Yelona's atmospheric processors weren't just producing bad-tasting air anymore. They were creating poisonous gas clouds that forced entire colonies to evacuate. The machines that had safely converted toxic atmospheres for decades were now making those atmospheres even more deadly. "Shut down all processors immediately," Dr. Yelena ordered, but when her team tried to shut them down, they discovered that the shutdown procedures had been changed. The new procedures were much more sophisticated than the old ones, designed to gradually reduce atmospheric toxins while maintaining safe breathing conditions during the shutdown process. Nobody could figure out how the new shutdown procedures worked. The original simple shutdown methods didn't work anymore because the processors had been completely redesigned. Dr. Yelona's team was forced to physically destroy several processors to stop them from poisoning entire worlds. War Admiral Kexton faced the most frightening problem of all. The defense grid that protected Council space wasn't just glitching anymore. It was targeting friendly ships. Defense platforms were shooting at civilian transports. Missile systems were locking onto Allied vessels. Shield generators were blocking rescue ships from reaching planets in distress. Override all automated systems, Kexton ordered. Switch to manual control. But manual control didn't work. The defense grid had been integrated into a complex network that managed itself automatically. The individual components couldn't be controlled separately anymore. Someone had created an incredibly sophisticated defense system that could coordinate attacks across multiple star systems simultaneously. The problem was that nobody knew how to turn it off. Emergency. Meetings were called on every council world. For the first time in decades, the various species were forced to work together to solve problems that threatened all of them. But when they tried to combine their knowledge, they made a disturbing discovery. Almost every major system in Council space had been quietly improved over the past 200 years. Communication networks, manufacturing processes, transportation routes, information storage, environmental controls, defense systems, all of them had been redesigned to be more efficient and reliable. But nobody could find complete records of who had made these improvements or how they worked. Check the personnel files, ordered Secretary General Dex Rio. Find out who was involved in all these upgrades. The investigation revealed a pattern that sent chills through the council leadership. Every major improvement, every efficiency upgrade, every system optimization had been suggested, designed, or implemented with the help of human advisors. Not human leaders or famous scientists, but quiet human engineers and technicians who had worked behind the scenes for decades. They had served on technical committees, consulted on design problems, and helped troubleshoot difficult challenges. The humans had never claimed credit for the improvements. They had always presented their suggestions as minor adjustments or simple fixes. The alien species had implemented the changes without really understanding them, assuming their own scientists had developed the new technologies. Now those humans were gone, and nobody else knew how their improvements actually worked. We need to contact the Human Federation immediately, Secretary General Dex Rio announced. We need their help to fix these systems. But when the Council tried to reach the humans, they found that all human colonies had been abandoned. Every human ship had left Council space. There were no forwarding addresses, no emergency contacts, no way to find them. The humans had vanished completely, taking with them the knowledge that kept galactic civilization running, and without that knowledge, everything was falling apart. 1 year after the humans left, the Galactic Council was dying. Fleet Admiral Torvex of the Vortak commanded the largest search operation in galactic history. Hundreds of ships from every Council species were scouring space, looking for any trace of humanity. They had to find the humans. Without them, civilization itself was collapsing. Report from Sector 7 called Communications Officer Nalara from her station. Still nothing, Admiral, came the reply through the crackling speakers. The communication system was getting worse every day. We found the abandoned colony on Kepler 442b, but it's completely empty. Torvex's crystal body dimmed with frustration. This was the 15th human colony they had investigated, and everyone was the same. The buildings were clean and undamaged. The infrastructure was intact. The gardens were still growing, but every human was gone and they had taken everything with them. What about their computers? Torvex asked. Any data left behind? Negative, sir. All computer systems have been wiped clean. Not destroyed, just empty, like they never contained any information at all. Dr. Minara of the Namari was leading a different kind of search. Her team was trying to reverse engineer the human modifications to Council technology. If they couldn't find the humans, maybe they could figure out how their improvements worked. It was proving impossible. Look at this. Dr. Minara said, showing her latest findings to the Emergency Science Council. This is a standard atmospheric processor from 50 years ago, and this is what it became after human modifications. The two machines looked similar from the outside, but the internal components were completely different. The modified version had thousands of tiny adjustments that worked together in ways the alien scientists couldn't understand. Every change seems simple by itself, Dr. Minara explained. A slightly different chemical mixture here, a small timing adjustment there. But when you put them all together, they create something far more complex than any of us can comprehend. Chief Engineer Colvin of the Krelix was having the same problem with the transportation networks. It's like trying to understand a symphony by looking at individual notes, he told his team. Each human change makes sense alone, but we can't see how they all fit together. The humans had never forced their changes on anyone. They had simply made suggestions during technical meetings, small improvements that seemed obvious once they were explained. The alien engineers had implemented the changes gladly, thinking they understood them completely. But now they realized they had only understood the surface. The humans had been thinking several steps ahead, designing systems that worked together in ways the aliens hadn't even noticed. Archaeological teams were sent to examine every former human facility. They found detailed maintenance logs, careful records of daily operations, and precise documentation of routine procedures. But the truly important information, the deep understanding of how everything connected, was missing. They didn't hide anything from us, reported Chief Archaeologist Ymira of the Vorthak. All their research data is here. All their technical specifications are complete. But there's something else. Something they never wrote down because they didn't think it was important. What do you mean? Asked Secretary General Dexrio. The way they thought about problems. The way they saw connections between things that seemed unrelated. The way they could look at a complex system and intuitively understand how to make it better. That wasn't in any manual or database. That was just how they were. The search expanded beyond Council space. Deep-range scouts traveled farther than any expedition in galactic history, following faint traces and old rumors. Some ships discovered human artifacts on distant worlds, ancient colonies from before the humans joined the Council. But these were archaeological sites thousands of years old, no recent human activity. Captain Velmore of the Krelix had been searching the Outer Rim for 6 months when he found something different. On a small world near the edge of the galaxy, his team discovered a human research station that looked like it had been abandoned just weeks ago. There are still fresh supplies in the storage rooms, reported his science officer. Some of the equipment is still warm. They were here recently. Velmore's team searched frantically for clues about where the humans had gone. They found shipping manifests, travel records, and communication logs, but all the destinations were listed in code that nobody could break. Send everything back to the Council, Velmore ordered. Maybe their computers can decode this, but the Council's computers were barely functioning. The crystal matrices that stored information were still dissolving. The quantum processors that handled complex calculations were failing one by one. Even simple tasks took hours to complete. Dr. Hex Anti of the Namari was trying to solve a different puzzle. She had discovered that humans had been involved in almost every major technological breakthrough of the past 2 centuries, not as the primary researchers but as consultants and advisors. Look at this pattern, she told the Emergency Research Committee. Every time we developed something new, there was a human on the development team. They never led the projects, but they were always there, making small suggestions that turned out to be crucial. The fusion reactors that powered Council worlds had been improved by human engineer Jamin Kang. The terraforming processes that created new colonies had been refined by human specialist Kyung-Soo Bai. The medical treatments that saved millions of lives had been enhanced by human researcher Yoonji Nam. They weren't trying to control us, Dr. Hexanti realized. They were just helping, making everything work a little better. And we never even noticed. The most disturbing discovery came from the historical archives. Linguistic expert Turan of the Vorthak found that human translators had been involved in almost every major diplomatic agreement of the past century. The trade treaties, the peace accords, the territorial agreements, all of them were negotiated with human translators present, Turan reported. They said it was just to help with language barriers, but I think it was more than that. When Turan examined the old treaty documents, She found subtle word choices and phrasing that had prevented countless conflicts. Misunderstandings that could have led to wars had been avoided by careful translation that preserved the true meaning while respecting cultural differences. They weren't just translating our words, Turan said. They were translating our intentions. They understood what we really meant, even when we didn't say it clearly. Meanwhile, the crisis was getting worse every day. Entire star systems were now cut off from the galactic communication network. Colonies were running out of essential supplies as manufacturing systems failed. Ships were stranded in space as navigation computers crashed. The Vorthak homeworld was experiencing rolling blackouts as their power grid became unstable. The Namari's floating cities were having trouble maintaining their atmospheric pressure. The Krelix's massive hive ships were developing structural problems that their engineers couldn't fix. We're losing everything our ancestors built, Secretary General Dexrio announced to the emergency session of the Council. We have perhaps 6 months before our civilization collapses completely. What about the Outer Rim expeditions? Asked War Admiral Kexton. Any signs of human activity? We've found traces, Admiral Torvex reported. Old campsites, abandoned equipment, fuel signatures from human ships. But they're always weeks or months old. It's like they're staying just ahead of our search teams. Maybe they don't want to be found, suggested Chief Researcher Mordun. The thought sent a chill through the council chambers. What if the humans were deliberately avoiding them? What if they knew about the crisis and had chosen not to help? That's impossible, Dr. Minara protested. Humans always helped solve problems. It's what they did. They wouldn't just abandon us. But as the months passed and the search continued to find nothing, some council members began to wonder if they had been wrong about human nature. Maybe the humans weren't as helpful as they had seemed. Maybe leaving the council had been their plan all along. The truth was simpler and more heartbreaking than any of them imagined. The humans hadn't left out of anger or greed or some secret plan. They had left because they finally understood that their help wasn't valued. They had spent 2 centuries making life better for everyone, and nobody had ever thanked them or even noticed what they were doing. So they had quietly walked away, leaving the galaxy to discover what it had lost. And now it might be too late to find them again. 2 years after the humans left, Secretary General Dexrio stood in what had once been the greatest council chamber in the galaxy. Half the lights were out because the power grid kept failing. Many of the representative seats were empty because their species could no longer afford to send delegates. The beautiful crystal walls were cracked and dim. The Galactic Council was dying, and everyone knew it. Population report, Dexrio called wearily. Population Coordinator Yelton of the Namari floated forward, her gaseous form a sick yellow color. 17 billion evacuated from failing colonies in the past month. The atmospheric processors on 43 worlds have shut down completely. We can't fix them, and we can't build new ones. The numbers were getting worse every week. Worlds that had been homes to billions were becoming uninhabitable, as the technology that sustained them failed. Without human knowledge, nobody could maintain the complex systems that made modern civilization possible. Industrial report, Dexrio continued. Chief Manufacturing Officer Kelwin of the Krelix clicked mournfully. Production is down to 12% of normal levels. Most automated factories have shut down. We're reverting to manual production methods that our ancestors used thousands of years ago. Medicine was running short across the galaxy. Food production was collapsing. Basic supplies that everyone had taken for granted were becoming precious resources that only the wealthy could afford. Military status, Dexrio asked, though he dreaded the answer. War Admiral Kexton's mandibles clattered with exhaustion. The defense grid is completely offline. We had to physically destroy most of the automated weapons to stop them from attacking our own ships. We're defenseless against any external threat, but there were no external threats anymore. Every species in council space was too busy trying to survive to think about conquest or war. Pirates and raiders had mostly disappeared because there was nothing left worth stealing. Dr. Minura of the Namari had spent 2 years trying to reverse engineer human technology. She approached the podium with a final report that would seal the council's fate. We cannot do it, she said simply. We have analyzed every human modification, every improvement, every innovation. We understand the individual pieces, but we cannot understand how they work together. Human thinking was fundamentally different from ours. She displayed a holographic image of a simple water purification system. This should be easy to fix. It's just a basic filtration process, but the humans modified it in 300 different ways. Each change is tiny, but together they make the system 10 times more efficient and completely reliable. The hologram shifted to show the system's failure points. When we try to fix one component, it affects all the others in ways we cannot predict. When we try to replace a part, the whole system stops working. We cannot maintain their improvements, and we cannot remove them without destroying everything. What about starting over? Asked Chief Engineer Colvin of the Krelix. Building new systems using our original designs? Dr. Minara's color shifted to deep blue, the Namari equivalent of shaking her head. We tried that, but our old technology cannot support the population levels we have now. The humans didn't just improve our systems. They made it possible for our civilization to grow far beyond what it could naturally sustain. The terrible truth was becoming clear. Over 2 centuries, humanity had quietly made the galaxy dependent on their knowledge. Not through conquest or control, but through helpfulness. They had solved every problem, improved every system, and made life better for everyone, and now they were gone. Sir, Communications Officer Nellara called out suddenly. We're receiving a transmission from the Outer Rim. It's from Ambassador Hyunwoo. The chamber fell silent. After 2 years of searching, they had found no trace of humanity. Now suddenly the humans were calling them. Put it through, Dexrio ordered. The main display activated, showing the familiar face of Hyunwoo Kim. He looked exactly the same as he had 2 years ago. Calm, polite, and slightly sad. Behind him they could see what looked like a thriving colony with green fields and blue skies. Greetings, Secretary General Dexrio, Hyunwoo said with a respectful bow. I hope this message finds you in good health. Ambassador Kim, Dexrio said, his crystal body brightening with hope. Thank the stars you've contacted us. We need your help desperately. Our civilization is collapsing without human knowledge. Hyunwoo nodded sadly. Yes, we know. We have been monitoring council space from a distance. We are sorry to see the difficulties you are experiencing. Then you'll help us? Dr. Minara asked eagerly. You'll come back and fix the systems that are failing? I'm afraid that is not possible, Hyunwoo replied gently. Humanity has moved beyond the galactic rim to begin a new life. We have no plans to return to council space. But millions are dying, War Admiral Kexton clicked frantically. Entire worlds are becoming uninhabitable. You have the knowledge to save us. Hyunwoo's expression grew sadder. Admiral, with respect, we offered that knowledge freely for 200 years. We shared every discovery, suggested every improvement, and helped solve every problem. But we were never asked to stay. We were never told that our contributions were valued. We were simply tolerated. The words hit the council like a physical blow. Everyone remembered how they had reacted to the human departure. Relief, indifference. Some had even been glad to see them go. We didn't understand, Secretary General Dexrio said desperately. We didn't realize how much you were doing for us. If we had known, you would have known if you had ever asked, Hyunwoo said quietly. In 2 centuries of cooperation, not once did any council member request a report on human contributions to galactic infrastructure. Not once did anyone ask how our improvements worked or what would happen if we left. Chief Researcher Mordoon stepped forward. We were fools. We took your help for granted. But surely you won't abandon us now. Surely your conscience won't allow billions to suffer for our mistakes. Hyunwoo was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice carried a deep sadness. Researcher Morden, humanity spent 2 centuries trying to make life better for everyone in the galaxy. We prevented wars through careful diplomacy. We solved famines through improved agriculture. We cured diseases through medical research. We made it possible for your civilizations to grow and thrive. He paused, looking directly into the camera, and in all that time not once were we thanked. Not once were we recognized for our contributions. Not once were we treated as equals rather than simply useful servants. That wasn't intentional, Dr. Minara protested. We never meant to make you feel unappreciated. Perhaps not, Hyunwoo agreed. But intentions matter less than actions. You had 200 years to notice what we were doing. You had countless opportunities to acknowledge our contributions. You chose not to. The silence in the council chamber was deafening. Everyone knew he was right. They had all benefited from human work, but none of them had ever bothered to understand or appreciate it. What can we do? Dexrio asked finally. How can we convince you to help us? Hyunwoo smiled sadly. You cannot. Humanity has learned a valuable lesson about where to invest our efforts. We have found worlds beyond the galactic rim where we can build something new, something where our contributions will be valued from the beginning. Are you alone out there? Nilara asked quietly. Oh no, Hyunwoo said, and for the first time his smile looked genuine. We have found other species who were also overlooked by the great galactic powers. Quiet people who build things instead of conquering them. Helpful species who solve problems instead of creating them. We are building a new kind of civilization together. The implication was clear. While the council had been focused on the major powers and their grand politics, they had ignored the smaller species who actually made things work. And now those species were gone too, following humanity to a better life among the stars. Will we ever see you again? Dexerio asked. Hyunwoo considered the question carefully. Perhaps in a few centuries, when your civilizations have learned to value cooperation over dominance, when you have learned to appreciate those who build rather than those who rule, when you have learned that strength comes from helping others, not from being served by them. He paused, but that is your choice to make. We will not return unless invited as equals, not as servants. The transmission ended, leaving the council chamber in stunned silence. In the days that followed, some council members proposed sending fleets to find humanity and force them to return, but those proposals were quickly abandoned. Even if they could find the humans, they had no way to compel them to help. Their military was barely functional, and their ships could barely travel between star systems. Others suggested promising the humans anything they wanted in exchange for their return. But what could they offer to people who had already found what they were looking for? The truth was simple and terrible. Humanity was gone and they weren't coming back. The galaxy would have to learn to survive without them. Some worlds would be abandoned, some technologies would be lost. Billions would die as the great civilization of the Galactic Council slowly collapsed back to the level it could naturally sustain. But perhaps someday, the survivors would build something better. Something that valued all its members,